All right, sitting down talking GC Security Summit 2018, what we liked, what we didn't like, what we found challenging, just having a conversation. GC Security Summit is a summit that is organized by the Government of Canada every year to talk about security in the organization at large, bringing in private sector, public sector, different stakeholders that we engage with. I would talk about what we liked, didn't like, and want to see next year.
That gets down to the essence of what innovation should be. Right? Innovation should be trying to do something slightly different to get a better result.
Yeah,
right?
Apply a different mindset to it.
Exactly.
Something like that. Not, oh, let's do an app.
Yeah, so my favorite session was the Insider Threat session. It's a topic I've thought about a lot over the past few years, and it's a topic that I find is sensitive, because if you're not careful, you end up alienating your colleagues, your users, but you have to be realistic. I think this falls under pragmatic security, and just using common sense that not everybody in your organization who is trusted has the same intentions at all times. Insider threats aren't always malicious. You can have accidental breaches just from a lack of understanding of what is and isn't on site. So I think it's increasingly important to make sure that you have a good program in place to make sure that you understand activities and behaviors and the ins and outs technically, but also the goings-on of the people that you are trusting with your most important pieces of information or technologies or processes.
My favorite presentation was one of the senior cybersecurity folks that talked about, basically you could design the most secure system ever, but if no one uses it, it's not secure. It doesn't do anything, right? If you're not working to build security measures and features in a way that make it easy for people to use, aren't going to slow them down, because any time that something's going to slow them down, they're going to find a way to get around it, to prevent it. So then you're not even building something that's secure anyway. So yes, we have to train people, like you mentioned, to want to do some of this stuff and understand why they should be doing some of these security features and handling information. But we also need to figure out a way to design the things with them in mind, because currently a lot of the stuff we do doesn't work.
So there's a presentation on University of Calgary's ransomware attack and how they handled that. And I'm not advocating for paying the criminal, by the way. Let me preface by saying that. But I thought the way they handled that attack, it was a very multifaceted approach. Like, it wasn't just about the IT and securing their system. It was about getting people aware and people involved. And they had to do that in a creative way as well, because from what I understand, they couldn't do it via email because that was disabled. And they also talked about a crisis coach. They had a lawyer that was negotiating.
Breach coach.
Breach coach.
Breach coach.
Yeah, something like that. And then they were talking about cyber insurance and all these other things that I don't think get considered in a lot of our incident management stuff. I just thought it was interesting and innovative. Justification for paying that ransomware. We used one example of the PhD student who had spent years doing research and then it got, blocked by the ransomware.
Yeah, so creating champions through experience.
Exactly. Yeah, but also that, they were able to recover the guy's, 8 months worth of research because of it, and it was they were willing to pay the price because
they thought it was worth it.
The cost was much higher.
He probably wouldn't have been much of a champion if he had lost his 8 months of doctoral thesis anyways.
Right.
So it's better for them to help them out in that case.
Actually, that was one of my better takeaways from the whole summit, was when they announced that password expiry is dead. It's no longer a concept that we like, and the whole room erupted in applause. And that's from security professionals who probably personally hate it, and probably from an administrative standpoint also think it's silly as well.
Hate having to manage it.
Well, and
exactly.
I can't remember if we talked about this on our podcast before, on our show before, but the 90-day security password change, the whole reason it was implemented, because they thought that once your password was compromised or stolen or whatever, it would take 90 days to actually get into the system.
Or for
Right.
someone to even know that it's there and be able to use it.
Exactly.
And so,
Yeah.
like, this was implemented years and years and years ago and hasn't been changed for what? Because people think it's a thing you're supposed to do?
Tradition.
Like, that's how we've done it.
And that's how we always do
it.
it.
It doesn't actually adhere to any basis of fact or evidence whatsoever.
Let's get Juicy on the show soon. We'll talk about.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What did you guys find was a great idea that might be problematic given our current environment?
There's a difficulty in recruiting people now
Mm.
because they're not willing to sacrifice having to drop off their phone or whatever, the connected devices, just to be able to do their work. And I thought that was interesting because it's about designing not only security with your users in mind in terms of like your client or who's going to use your product or your services. It's also a shift to designing security for like your employees in mind as well, because in a way you also have to get their buy-in.
Far more often now, people are coming with their personal device and their work device, and some places have even gone to bring your own device. And so you're changing your mindset from let's lock everything down into this perimeter that we can secure with firewalls and with physical walls and all this stuff,
Yeah.
to changing to a know where your data is, know who's getting access to that data and controlling it from those places, and then having layered defenses along the way in between.
And it kind of goes on along the new theme of, I guess, the new theme of zero trust networks. So now, I guess the new mantra out there is that, well, we know that you're kind of exposed anyway. Like, things are on the internet. You have to transmit between places and things.
Mm.
So, start from that premise first. And that way, yeah, like, we don't have a wall that we act behind. So pretend that you're already out in the open. So now what? So it's exactly what you said, right? Know your data, know your business rules, know what you're supposed to protect and what you're not. And I realize sometimes that's not always an easy thing, too, because then it comes down to the training and awareness part of that. Right? Does everybody know, what your categorizations are? Do you know, like, is it simple? Is it easy to understand? And then can you apply that, kind of wide? And I don't think that's as easy as said.
But one person said very clearly, talking about the average everyday user, so in this context we'll say government workers, employees, something as simple as everyone should know that to hide your pass when you leave your building because that makes you a target.
Mm-hmm.
And the person said this so matter-of-factly. And to me, yes, I always hide my pass, but I've just sort of been brought up in that community where, one, it doesn't need to be hanging out, you might lose it or something.
Yeah.
Two, it does show that you are a government employee and
Yep.
can make you a target. Is that common knowledge, which I don't think it is?
I don't think it is.
And two, can we explain, or are we just the paranoid people in the back room when we go and talk to your average everyday government employee in this context, to try to say, like, you are a target, like, yeah, you may not think so, but you have access to information that could be useful to someone, and so by them seeing that you have this pass, they could use that and leverage that information.
Yep. I think that in different places, different security agencies,
Yeah.
you will find people who are way more hardline on this
Yeah,
stuff
for sure.
than we ever will be.
Fair
And
enough.
I think I've had conversations about this. People don't understand how much of a target they actually are, whether it's a net that's cast over an entire set of people. I don't know how you even slice and dice it, or spearfished or targeted specifically. The threat is out there, and depending on your lens, your view of how big that threat is, it will change how you take action. Putting your pass in your pocket is the smallest thing you can do. Just to not clearly make yourself a target, because anybody can be bought, and that's sort of the threat, right? Like, if you have access to a government building, if you have access to government information, and you are willing to take that money, you are a threat. Then you go back to the insider threat sort of issue.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So,
And I think the word threat, too, means different things to different people, right? So for us, a threat just generally means something that we're trying to protect against.
It's kind of like that balance of, when you see that guy on TV with the tinfoil hat and he's like, the satellites are watching me, and you're like, do people view us in that same sort of manner as well, kind of thing? So it kind of...
If you can show the cost or the consequences of some of this stuff, I mean, how can you say we're paranoid?
So changes for next year? Talks you think you'd like to see?
I'd like to see more international partners. I thought it was great that we had the UK too. Because one thing that we realized from that presentation, I think, was that there was a lot of almost similar work we were doing, and even in discussion with them afterward, they were saying how the US is doing something similar, and they're doing something, and there's a lot of room for collaboration.
Yeah, and we're already behind the 8 ball on so many things. So if someone's doing something well, let's just leverage it. Let's figure out a way to make it work here.
Don't waste the 12 months
type thing.
Yeah.
Right?
So more collaborations, I guess, at the end of the day too, right?
Yeah.
Bring us
But
where
then
we need to
also
go.
more exposure to what these international partners are doing, because then we'll know. You know what I mean?
I'd like to see more about the collision of physical and digital or cybersecurity, how they're starting to combine, because I think that's going to be a huge challenge in the next little while.
Well, and there's not going to be a difference between a lot of it at some point.
I'd love to see more about IoT next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big topic.
IoT is one gap, and I mean, we could get into artificial intelligence and cyber and a lot of that stuff, but IoT is one where a lot of communities are interested.
Mm-hmm.
You get the automated vehicles, you get industrial controls, you get the healthcare sector, government's kind of getting into this. All of them have their own space to play in this, and they're all trying to do little things here and there, but there's no cohesive voice around just enhancing security around Internet of Things.
I'd love to see open source intelligence gathering at the next.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
the
that'd
next
be
conference.
crazy, yeah.
The use of social media,
Facebook, Twitter,
social engineering. How does someone do that?
It's a good way to creep people out and get them to take security
part of it,
seriously.
yeah.
And actually, in everyday, so I'm not an individual that's on any type of social media. But then through my girlfriend, I have people approach me all the time and say, "Oh, how is it when you're doing such and such, and how is this?" And I'm like, "I don't understand. I've never talked to you. I don't."
Who are you again?
Who are you? And I'm also bad with names, which also doesn't help. But that also goes, and it's you're right. I think that's a huge area where a lot could be exploited.
I
Yeah,
also
no, I
want
think
to
that's
see social engineering.
Yep.
That'd be so interesting.
In practice, it'd be interesting to sit there, blank stage, and have someone come in and just start.
Yeah, I would love a
a
demonstration.
A crew of people, engineering folks,
No,
and then they just.
more how effective it can be. How you don't realize, exactly what you were saying, getting people interested in being compromised or being compromised, how easy it is.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
It's as simple as did you let someone in the door behind you?
Yep.
As a courtesy thing, as a kind of chivalrous thing, I sometimes hold the door open. I'm
Yeah.
wait, but I know the person.
It's socially acceptable. Thing.
Exactly, it's
Yeah.
socially acceptable, so you kind of use that as your hack to get in, kind of.
Right. So things like that, analyzing that.
Exactly.
But getting some more perspectives from the private sector, I think, would be really interesting. If you could get some sort of objective threat analysis panel by a couple different people in the or companies in the field, I think it would be really useful to see what they're looking at, because they're not doing things all that differently. I mean, from a mission statement point of view, right? Yes, we're the government and we look at certain things, but they're looking at really similar stuff too. And a lot of the threat reports you're seeing coming out from these organizations are pretty useful things.
So anything else you want to close on? I think we've been riffing on this stuff enough.
I think overall the message at the summit was very much about understanding who we're doing security for, making sure that we're changing the way that we do security, because let's be honest, things haven't been working in the past. There's a lot of stuff we do very well, but there's a lot of things we don't do very well. And just generally a really positive vibe about there's a lot of cool stuff happening right now.
I was actually really happy to see, this was my first time at the summit, and I was so happy to see so many security professionals. I actually did not know our community was that big.
Yep.
And that amazed me, and it made me really hopeful to see that we're actually covering all the bases and we have that many people out there having their eyes on what we're doing and how we're doing it and making things better.
I was happy to see how many women were also represented
That was
as
great.
speakers, especially as keynotes,
Yeah.
on the big stage, not necessarily hidden away in the workshops. Although there were a lot there too, but it was just nice to see.
And even the crowd was
For sure.
was quite good, because I know cybersecurity
diverse.
is an area, IT, STEM, everything in general.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work to be done, but
Yeah, but a lot of the IT security presentations or cybersecurity related ones, there was female speakers.
Yeah.
So
and I guess I'll do a selfless pitch, but there was a couple people who said, you don't have to be a technical person to be in cybersecurity. We need everyone we can get, and as someone who didn't come from a technical background, it was nice to hear some of those conversations happening about, you know, what are the policy, social sciences type people talking about? What are
Behavioral economics.
behavioral economics is a huge one that I think would be really cool, especially understanding nudges around getting users to understand like phishing campaigns and things like that would be really cool. So it's nice to see.
Cool. All right, so we'll close off the chat. That's it.
I think you need a better sign off.
What we'll just do is edit it and go to something else. Yell at the camera.
Stay secure.
Stay so
Okay.
bad. All right, that's it. All right, scary shit.
Secure shit.
Secure your shit.
Secure that shit.
That's such a bad word.